Hello, I'm JD Bones, fantasy author, podcaster, and artist. Today I'll be reading from the Pilgrim Stone. While I draw some faces, join me and relax to this ASMR inspired video. To read more of the Pilgrim Stone, click on the links below in the description, and to view more art, visit my Etsy shop at yourcardboutique.etsy.com. Chapter 1. Consus Edderick crashed through the thick forest foliage. Twigs and leaves crunched under his boots. Sunbeams illuminated his mad dash through the woods. His heart beat like a war drum and competed with the sound of crushing brush beneath him. His older brother Chiron ran beside him, his bulky muscular frame destroying the shrubbery as he ran. Sweat and dirt covered his coffee-colored skin, and though Consus knew he was scared, his eyes were fixed forward. "Are they still behind us?" Consus asked. His voice was a raspy bark. "I don't want to stop and find out." A thunderous battle cry erupted from the trees several paces behind him. Consus heard the menacing stomps of the barbarian horde that chased them. "Don't look, just keep running." Still, he dared to steal a glance over his shoulder. Large shadowy figures. The large shadowy figures of the Bergs charged after them like war horses. Their horrific scarred gray hides were pale in the sunlight. Leaves and twigs were caught in their long black hair, and the simple garb wrapped around their enormous muscles. Tusks jutted from the bottom of their jaw, and horns on their foreheads. He shouldn't have looked. Fear washed away the pain in his legs and pumped his body with adrenaline. He followed Chiron, ducking under trees, leaping through shrubs, and running down a steep hill. "We're almost there," Chiron said. "There's a stream up ahead, and a tree that we passed by earlier. We can hide under the roots." Consus said nothing, not wanting to waste his breath. He could hear the water flowing just ahead of them. The trees parted and gave way to a wide stream, walled by steep banks on either side. The scent of wet mud and decaying leaves filled his nostrils. Chiron pointed to a tree several paces away at the edge of the bank. It leaned away from the stream, half its roots standing in the air. The exposed dirt beneath it created an alcove in the stream, slightly covered by low-hanging lateral roots. Chiron jumped into the stream, the water coming up mid-calf on his boots. Consus followed, and cold water splashed onto his clothes. They waded over to the alcove and pressed themselves into the wall of the bank. He scrambled to arrange the tree's roots and moss like a curtain to hide behind. He mimicked Chiron when he saw him rub the smelly mud on his clothes and skin, recalling what his brother had said earlier. "Bergs can't see as well as we do. They rely on sound and smell." He noticed that the forest had become silent. No birds chirped, no squirrels scampered through the branches. Nothing. Soon, there was the steady thump-thump of the Bergs as they approached the bank of the stream. He looked at Chiron. He was motionless and breathless. If he was not standing, Consus would think him dead. Bits of forest stuck out of his woolly black hair, and red mud caked the dark brown skin of his face. Consus assumed he looked just as bizarre. Inside, he heard the Brogues splash about water as they too jumped into the stream. It was hard to understand what they were saying in their language, but it was clear that they had lost the brothers' trail. Consus let a small sigh of relief escape him. There was a loud splash as one of the Brogues leapt through the water. He came to a stop just outside the alcove. He sniffed and snorted the air and the walls of the bank. He took a slow step forward. and then another stepped forward. Consus stopped breathing. He did not even blink. He prayed he was not sweating lest his natural odor break through the musky barrier of moss and roots. Brugh was only a pace away now, his black beady eyes staring directly at him. His crude iron war axe scraped the wall of the riverbank and left a scar in the mud. His rancid breath climbed up Consus's nose as he huffed and snorted, closer and closer. A stick snapped across the stream. The Brugh spun around and hurled his war axe through the air. It landed in the back of an elk, drinking on the opposite side. The elk shrieked and moaned in pain before it turned and sprinted into the woods. The party of Brughs laughed and jeered as the elk ran away with their comrade's weapon. The nosy Brugh gave one final snort before he turned away and gave chase. The others yelled and cheered him on as they followed him, determined to cook their new escaping dinner. Aaron peered through the dangling moss and stepped into the stream. "They've gone." Consus breathed a sigh of relief and left the tree.
"I thought you said there would only be 2 Brughs. I counted at least 4.
He looked at his reflection in the water and wiped the mud from his long nose and chin. He brushed the foliage from his hair and watched as it floated downstream. "There are more than expected," he said. He tried to clean himself up, but missed a patch of dirt on his square jaw. "But that just means more gold for us." He tapped one of his twin blades that hung from his hips. "The more we kill, the more we earn. Besides, you can handle yourself in a sword fight." Consus rolled his eyes. "I think your years as a soldier make you better equipped than I. As a scholar, I have only read about sword fighting." Hiram clapped him on the shoulder and flashed him a confident half-grin. "Don't discount what I've taught you in the past year. That's insulting. I'm a damn good teacher, aren't I?" "I suppose you're adequate," Consus said, with feigned humility, as he climbed up the banks. Chiron was a good teacher, and it was nice to hear his brother compliment his growth as a swordsman. His skill had developed quite well since he joined his 3 brothers a year ago. Still, mercenary work was not what he had imagined it to be. "If you're confident in my blade, then why did we run from them?" Chiron scanned the forest around the bank before turning and following the stream. "We were supposed to meet Alton and Ewan first, and then take the monsters by surprise in their camp." "I hope they're all right." Consus and his 3 brothers had been following the Brugh's trail for the past several days before it disappeared into the forest. We discovered the tracks just this morning, splitting into 2 directions. The brothers chose to split into 2 groups to expedite their search. Consus and Chiron traveling in one direction, Ewan and Alton in the other. "I'm sure they're fine. Ewan's been tracking longer than you have, and Alton's a blazing mage." Chiron shrugged his big shoulders. At 22 years old, he was the eldest Edderick sibling. He often acted like the 6-year gap between he and Consus was much larger, though. "Don't fret. We'll need to travel around the outskirts of the Brugh camp to avoid detection. If Ewan follows his trail, it should lead him to the camp as well. Meet up with them before we attack." Consus joined Chiron as he crouched to the ground. "The camp is a mile in the other direction. It will take longer to sneak over. By then it'll be night. Don't worry about the dark. I've got something to deal with that. For now, we'll take this route." He drew a crude map in the dirt to indicate their position and desired direction. The sun had already begun to set as they trekked deeper into the forest. The rising shadows made it difficult for Consus to navigate through the brush. The further he walked, the louder and slower his steps became. He felt and heard every leaf, twig, and pebble under his feet, amplifying his missteps. Chiron cast an occasional glance over his shoulder, as if he could silence Consus's feet by looking at them.
How does one move without making a sound?
Despite Chiron's bulky frame, he moved with great care and little effort on the woodland around him.
I can't even see where I'm placing my feet.
Consus tripped over a root, but avoided falling to the ground.
Should we light a torch?
No, Chiron said. He stopped and retrieved a small, palm-sized tin from his pocket under the leather cuirass. He'll see us coming a mile away. We'll use the ointment Alton gave us. How did he say to work it? Consus took the tin from Chiron's hand and opened it. A translucent green mud caked the bottom of the container.
We're supposed to say the chant and rub it on our eyelids.
You do it, he said with obvious discomfort. Consus held the open tin up to the sky and spoke the words Alton had given him.
Nook in eye.
The green mud flowed softly. Consus dipped 2 fingers into the cold goop and rubbed them onto his eyelids. As he opened his eyes, the shadows of the coming night vanished before him. He could see the forest before him as clear as day. The colors of the leaves and plants around him were as evident to him as if the sun were still shining. I can't believe Alton called this a simple spell of night vision. It's amazing.
Well, I'm glad that you're enjoying Pearl Harbor.
Chiron dipped his fingers into the green mud
Until they
goo
get
and
the
rubbed it
Holocaust.
on his own eyes. How long will it last?
Only
a few hours.
Today,
Then we'd better get going.
Todd sent my dad about.
The moon soon took the night sky
women
with the
march.
stars.
For Trump?
Their light trickled
Ha!
down through the
Did
canopy
they find
of
a
the
million
forest,
women?
providing slivers of silver to light the forest floor.
Tens of thousands of
Under the
evangelical
spell,
Christians
they were
God.
golden sunbeams
praying for
piercing
America's
through the
atonement and
trees.
for Trump's return to the
You could
White
see the
House.
nocturnal creatures of the forest moving through the branches and the bushes.
Engel and other
An
speakers
owl
warned of a
plunged
multitude of
down
threats they
from the
say are
branches
facing
of a
America:
beech tree
crime, religious persecution, abortion, and the
into
growing
the ground
acceptance of
below.
LGBTQ people.
Oh my
its
God,
talons
I
reaching
fucking
for an
hate Todd.
unsuspecting rodent.
I'm
The
sorry.
shadow of
I
a wolf
should- I can't
slipped
help but
casually
laugh.
through
It's
the
so
distant
stupid.
trees.
Susan Marsh, who drove from Maryland, said she
Chiron
attended
halted
because she
and
fears
raised a finger
if
to his
Democrats
lips.
maintain power,
He
her
knelt,
10-month-old
signaling
grandson will
Consus
grow
to
up
do
in a
the same.
nation where he's pressured to identify as a girl.
Consus obeyed as he spotted the source of his brother's
I just-
attention. A small
fuck's sake.
clearing in the distance, where 2 shadowy
And the
figures
Democrats
sat
can't win
by
against
a
this.
little
Like, what a
orange
bunch
fire.
of fucking idiots.
Tendrils of smoke slipped
Everybody.
past the branches of the trees, and Consus caught the scent of overcooked meat.
The Bergs, we found them.
He was filled with a sense of excitement wrapped in an aura of fear and anxiety. 3 hulking figures emerged from the shadows to join the 2 brogues by the fire.
You said there were only 2. Now I count 5.
Oh
It
my God,
matters
this is
little,
Jennifer
Chiron
Garner.
said.
Yeah.
It matters a lot. There could just as easily be 10.
Even with 10, the 4 of us could take them. Chiron flashed him a cocky grin. Don't panic. We'll search the area to be sure there are no others lurking about. Use the call to see if Ewan's nearby. Consus whistled in a low, chirping tone, mimicking the call of a night sparrow. Its whistle stood out from the hushed nocturnal creatures, but not enough to draw the Berg's attention. There were no other night sparrows in the area. They lived in the south of the mountains, but the Bergs didn't know that. After a few moments, Consus heard a similar whistle, repeated back to him. He couldn't help but smile.
Ewan and Alton, they're all right after all.
He recognized his older brothers as they stepped out of the shadow of a distant tree. Ewan's tall, lanky figure was huddled in a low crouch as he approached them. He clutched his longbow in a tight fist and tried to brush away the thistles from his bushy black beard. Alton walked just beside him, his slim figure lost in his purple robes. His gaunt face was hidden in the shadows of his wide-brimmed black hat. Nice to see you aren't dead yet, Ewan said. That's the plan.
Oh my God.
Chiron pointed to the camp. I counted 5 brogues. Did you see any more than that? Alton
Oh
and
my
Ewan
God.
shook their heads. Good. I think we can surround them and catch them by surprise. Ewan, Once you have a good position, fire on the bergs. Consus and I will jump into the fray.
What am I supposed to do?
Alton asked. Take care of any stragglers.
Taylor and many others in
But
attendance noted
no
the crowd
fire,
was more racially and
Kyron
ethnic
said.
diverse than most
Mage fire
conservative
makes it
political
hard
rallies.
to
Yeah.
identify the bodies.
Alton gave a disappointed
for the event.
but nodded.
Organizers chose to hold the event
Consus
on
tried
Yom
to
Kippur.
swallow his fear as
But we
Kyron
say in
drew their
Judaism because
attack
it is a day
positions
to atone for
in the
sin. There
dirt.
are also a lot of
He
Israel flags
realized he
there.
would be
Yeah.
alone.
Probably a lot of them carried by
Shouldn't we stick
Christians,
together?
oddly enough.
Kyron shook his head. It's better this way. If we cluster together, some of them might try to escape. Besides,
Yeah, Democrats
you
have
can
failed on
handle
their
yourself
messaging for
against
this
at least
election.
one of
They
these.
didn't.
I'm afraid I'm not
People
as
said we
confident
don't want
as
more
you.
Biden.
I am
And then
not
Kamala
a
Harris goes out and does
master
interviews for
Don't
saying, like,
stop doubting
basically,
yourself,
I'm not offering
Kyron
anything
said.
different from Joe Biden, almost
Vi et
verbatim.
animo. Strength and
What do they think
courage,
is going to
these are
happen?
enough.
They're going to vote for the candidate they perceive to be
Consus
the change
sighed
candidate.
at their family motto. Vi et animo. It was the only phrase his brother knew in ancient common, yet he recited it almost as often as their late father. He nodded and followed his older brother closer to the camp. Ewan and Alton walked in the opposite direction to flank their targets. He hoped that his strength and courage were enough to defeat the Brooks.